What am I supposed to do with this? A response to part 2 of Brad Kick's series on shifting our culture toward ecological ways of being in the world. Written and read by Taylor Reed. Toward the 10,000 Stories, a manifesto is full of needed reminders. I don't have pushback that'll help it hit home. You want some critical thoughts? Fine. It tries to cover too much ground. Irony. That's often the culprit with my writing when I request Brad's feedback. I like to piece 7 subjects together rather than nailing down one solid theme in 7 ways. You could argue that that's what's going on in Toward the 10,000 Stories. It doesn't matter much. Sometimes the muse offers up something of clarity, something substantial enough for sustained scrutiny. Other times, the muse gestures in a direction, but you've got to do the rough assembly. Why is the dialogical, as in dialogue or back and forth, endeavor of critique, of calling out, so vaunted? I'll admit, it's a way of expressing care for someone's words, as well as respect for what's true in general. Our hyper-stimulated, novelty-minded culture monopolizes focus, concentration, time, and thought. So making the space to respond to longish-form writings isn't trivial. It also, at best, lays a foundation for the fine-tuning of an author's proposition. It expresses consideration and holds the potential to improve written work. Does it benefit the reader, other than ensuring they're paying attention? Holding more grace towards others' words and ideas is another form of care. I can be attentive, yes, but I also keep in mind that people's priorities, personal experiences, and persuasions are scattered. If something sticks out kind of funny, maybe I let it be for a bit. I can take some of that energy and pursue a different approach. I won't start with, what quibbles do I have with this, nor how would I write this differently. I'll start by asking, what am I supposed to do with this, amongst my community, in my place, with whatever circumstances are before me? Saving more critical analysis to be leveled towards my own lived response and integration of whatever resonates is a positive start. There are reasonable limits. Hold words accountable, by all means. You probably have a line in mind, and I've got one too. Writings like Towards the 10,000 Stories boil down to exploring facets of living well. Quote, for living in right relationship with that place, end quote. I'd rather spend time with whatever hits deepest than whatever I don't find helpful. If something trips me up, I can just set it aside. The language is secondary. How often have I scrawled a question mark next to a phrase or paragraph in a book, only to return later and find those exact words understandable? Anyway, with that aside, here's the arc of Brad's piece. Quote, there are 10,000 ways to live in the world, each with its own economy and culture, its own spirit, its own poetry, mythology, and unique way of being. Let us not presume that we've already found the best one, nor that there is only one to be found. There are some truly desirable, well-drawn ideas out there. Ways to restore the raucous chorus of wild places, to feed our communities while regenerating the land, and to move away from economies that exploit and dehumanize toward cultures of reciprocity and care. As for the idea that there is a best way, I'm agnostic. I don't know what it is, and I don't think anyone else does either. Let's grow multitudes one by one, place by place. The particulars of each are beautiful, embedded in these 10,000 ways through 10,000 by 10,000 stories. These are not stories we need to invent because they're already here, alive in the landscape. End quote. And to complement that, here are a few other highlights that deserve repetition. Number 1, Gary Snyder's, quote, ideas for restoring our connection, end quote, to stories. A, the power of staying where you are, and B, and then getting to work. Number 2, quote, I think the spirits will speak when we find ways to be quiet enough to hear them, but I also think that they can only speak to us using what's in our own heads. If your head is full of modern-day myths about efficiency, hyper-individualism and market-based solutions, there's just not much there for them to use. If we want to hear more, let's first learn from those traditions that view the world through a lens of relationship, built on qualities like reciprocity, restoration, humility, frugality, and care. End quote. Number 3, quote, look at the foundational folk culture of any people and you'll find food, craft, and art in the form of songs, dances, and stories in particular. Go further to look at any long-sustaining resilient culture, and you'll see that all of those things point back to a wisdom of caring for the place, with story after story of self-control, reciprocation, not taking too much, leaving plenty for others, and completing the generative exchange. These values are baked into the old stories and into the poetry of place. End quote. Brad's write-up focuses on the power, transmission, and discovery of stories. It doesn't shy away from the other side, naming threats diminishing traditionally revered values, a sense of place, and meaningful work. The proper response to a piece like this isn't settling into words, wrestling with them at length, or expecting satisfaction from them. A livelier response is to seek and pursue what the words themselves are pointing towards. I can sit, listen, stay, embed. I ache to encounter the same stories Brad refers to. They're not going to come through this computer, and I don't expect them to appear once I sort the contents of my head neatly. They're from somewhere outside. So while wise folks are doing their best to gesture towards them, at some point, I've got to get out. The stories aren't worked out at their core in the world of ideas or words. Refined, maybe, but they're truly born of stillness, silence, action, and embodiment. If you want to test their mettle, that's the proving ground. In final consideration towards the 10,000 stories, what am I going to do? I'm heading out for a wet forest edge meadow meander, golden leaves falling around me.